Now that the New York Giants got their man in John Harbaugh, how do they get back to the path of respectability? Locked on Giants starts right now.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in America. My name is Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome our Everydayer Club members, our Blue Crew community members, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And folks, yes, the Giants did it. They got John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh is in the process of finalizing a 5-year deal worth a reported $100 million. So that comes to about $20 million per year, right about what we expected, but they got him. Yay. Oh, I'm so glad this is over, which is why I'm coming to you so early on a Thursday, actually. This is our Friday show, but I'm coming to you a little bit earlier than usual. Anyway, on today's show, we're going to take a look at how Harbaugh can maybe get the Giants back on track, okay? This is a big hire. I'm sorry. I can't help smiling. I am just so glad this is done. I really love this hire. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the potential assistant coaches and coordinators he'll bring on board. We'll talk about his working relationship with Joe Schoen and what it means for Joe Schoen moving forward. So we got a lot to talk about on this quote-unquote emergency episode of Locked On Giants. So glad to have you with us. And let's get into it. All right. We got a lot to cover. All right. So John Harbaugh on board in the process of finalizing the 5-year, $100 million contract, as I mentioned. And by the way, before we go any further, I've got to give kudos to Brian Daboll. A source of mine who I trust very well told me that Brian Daboll was really instrumental in talking with John Harbaugh and telling him, look, the Giants organization is a great one. You're getting a great quarterback in Jaxson Dart. You know, the organization's first class. And everything that Daboll told John Harbaugh, actually, you know, he was able to experience from the moment they sent Steve Tisch's private plane to get him in Baltimore. They rolled out the red carpet for him, put on a full court press, as they say. And Harbaugh, who went home to Baltimore and was supposed to meet with the Tennessee Titans at his Baltimore home, decided, nah, I'm going with the Giants. And so there they are. The Giants got their man. And, you know, the selling points for John Harbaugh, as I understand, Jaxson Dart was a big one. You know, he did get an opportunity to meet with Jaxson Dart. The two of them talked. I don't know how long the discussion was, but Jaxson Dart is a very persuasive young man. And look, guy's got some talent, as I've been talking about on these shows for quite some time now. The ownership rolled out the red carpet, as I mentioned. John Mara, who, you know, is still battling cancer, was there, helped them out, you know, with the recruiting effort. Joe Schoen, who built up the rapport. Giants really did a good job with this one. They wanted him. They weren't going to be denied, and they just pulled out all the stops. So kudos to the Giants for getting it done. They got themselves a home run hire in John Harbaugh. And you kind of knew that was the direction they were going in, that they wanted an experienced head coach with a pedigree if possible, because look, they had worked with novices before. It didn't work out. It was time to kind of, you know, go back to the well, so to speak, and go back to what has worked in the past. So we'll see if John Harbaugh can bring that success that he had in Baltimore to New York. I think he can. So let's talk about then, how can he make the Giants a competitor? The first thing you have to understand, and if you watched my show earlier in the week with Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens, is what are the Giants getting in John Harbaugh? And the answer is simple. They are getting a leader of men and a culture setter. Now, you could probably say, well, that applies to any head coach. John Harbaugh has done it before. Okay, and he's had success with it. He is a guy who holds guys accountable. During Baggy Day, when I went around and I talked to about 18 different Giant players, one of the questions I asked every single one of them is, what does this team need in a head coach? And every single guy I spoke with said, we need somebody who's not going to take any fluff, who's going to set the tone, who's going to hold everybody accountable, whether you're the first round draft pick, $100 million free agent signing, or, the third string, quarterback on the team. That's what we need. We need somebody to come in here and just set the tone. And with all due respect to Brian Daboll, that was missing. Brian Daboll, I think, became a little too much of a player's coach, too much of their buddy. And it's kind of like with parenting in a way. If you become your child's buddy, now it's like, okay, you kind of lose a little bit of perspective here so that if the kid needs to be disciplined, you don't have that cachet, if you will. With John Harbaugh, he's going to come in here, and don't get me wrong, he's not going to be, the hard-nosed guy that Tom Coughlin was initially when he first was hired, but he's going to have some of those Coughlin traits, where he's going to demand professionalism, where he's going to demand accountability, where he's going to demand everybody, leave their egos at the door and just develop and be the best possible player they can be. And that it also applies to the coach and to the staff. So that's a big one. And that can't be underestimated. All right. Before we even get to the X's and O's, the accountability factor. I've been talking about, for weeks, how the Giants atmosphere has been a country club and how that has to go away. And several players I spoke with agreed with me that it was a country club atmosphere. So Harbaugh hopefully comes in here, gets rid of all the stuff that's in the locker room that shouldn't be in there, the pool table, the ping pong table, the lazy boy chairs. Get that stuff in the players' lounge where it belongs and not in the locker room, which is their work environment. That was the approach Coughlin took. We'll see if Harbaugh takes that same approach and, to what degree. But accountability is a big thing. Obviously, developing the players is going to be a huge thing. The Giant players, you could go down the list of the Giants roster and you could say, okay, how many players truly developed under the past coaching staff? All right. Jaxson Dart, okay, he developed. Wan'Dale Robinson came back. But you also had several guys who took steps backwards. Jalen Hyatt never got out of the gate. Evan Neal was just a complete bust. Deonte Banks was a bust. So you need a guy who's going to come in and get the best out of these guys. And that starts with the head coach and who he surrounds the team with. So that's something that Harbaugh can bring in. And then most of all, Harbaugh knows what winning looks like. Having done it as a head coach, he knows how to build a program. All right. I talk about this all the time here on the program. A head coach candidate can sit there and tell ownership, my vision for the team is A, B, C, and D. Tough, smart, dependable, winner. Okay, great. But how do you get to that? Harbaugh knows how to get to that. He has done it with the Ravens. He's going to hopefully do it again with the Giants. And that's really, really important and a factor that I think a lot of people overlook. Anybody could sit there and say anything they want. But at the end of the day, as Coughlin used to say, talk is cheap, play the game. Well, the same saying applies to the head coach. Talk is cheap, play the game. You want to say that you're going to build a winner? Show us. And Harbaugh has a formula that he has developed down in Baltimore that has resulted in something like 12 winning seasons, 13 winning seasons for the Ravens. So there's a lot to like about this, this hire. This is a huge hire for the Giants organization, one that they just had their hearts set on. And it's revitalizing the fan base. I know it's definitely revitalizing me. And brighter skies are certainly ahead. But that being said, there are still some things that need to be sorted out, amongst them assistant coaches, which we will talk about right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the draft picks positions are set, and so many teams are looking for their franchise quarterback. If you've ever wished to become a pro quarterback, getting drafted first overall by the Giants, now you can because there's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number one draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the number one quarterback career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. Sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry and involve your teammates. Give your input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual game in 2D, and rise through the ranks to become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a quarterback career from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. Just head on over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we got a little something special for you. Use our promo code LOCKED ON in all caps in the game store and get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB Football Legend QB1, it's your legacy. Hey, Giant fans, as the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-proportioned ingredients right to your door with easy to follow recipes that actually taste great. You know, I've been a customer of Home Chef. I can vouch for how good they really are and how convenient their service really is. They're rated the number one service by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease, and it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule: 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. Over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. Recipes are simple but feel elevated, even restaurant quality, with dishes co-created by chefs like Gordon Ramsay. Everything arrives pre-proportioned so that there's less prep, less mess, and no wasted food. It saves you time and money. Home Chef customers save on average $86 per month on groceries. And for a limited time right now, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off their first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/locked on. That's homechef.com/locked on for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and happy Friday. If you're watching the show on Friday or if you're watching it on Thursday, happy Thursday. The Giants got John Harbaugh. I mean, how exciting is this? They finally got the guy, a winning coach. This is a big day for the franchise. But you know what? It's only the start for the franchise. Getting the head coach in place, that's the start. Now comes some of the key questions, and one of which is going to be, what is John Harbaugh's staff going to look like? Now, obviously, you know, the tendency or the expectation is how many of his staff members from Baltimore is he going to bring with him? According to some reports, Ravens owner Steve Biscotti said that they're probably not going to retain a lot of the staff members from Harbaugh's staff. So that means that those people should be free to sign elsewhere. Now, that being said, let's start with the coordinators. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Rooney Rule does now apply to coordinators. So before the Giants can name, you know, this guy or that guy or whoever as a coordinator, they do have to go through the interview process. They do have to interview two minorities. All right. And then they can decide from there. So that rule does need to be satisfied. But in terms of the offensive coordinator, it's all reports, all signs are pointing to Todd Monken, who was Harbaugh's offensive coordinator down in Baltimore. All right, now Monken, he's an interesting selection. He's had some success over his career. He obviously worked with Lamar Jackson, although this past year, Jackson, not quite the MVP that, he's been twice before in the league. But Lamar Jackson has had a degree of success with Todd Monken. Baker Mayfield, Todd Monken worked with him when the two were in Cleveland. In Baker Mayfield's second year, Mayfield threw for 3,827 yards, which at the time was a career best mark for Mayfield. Mayfield has since, topped that mark since going to Tampa Bay. So that offensive coordinator role is going to be a big one because the Giants' offense last year, not horrible. Okay. I mean, yes, they need a few more pieces. They need Malik Neighbors back. They need another wide receiver. But the running game finished 5th overall in the league. The offensive line was a delightful surprise. So the offense, not as much in dire straits as maybe the defensive side of the ball was. So, we'll talk in a second about assistant coaches that I think might make the cut from the old Giants staff. But let's talk about the defensive coordinator spot. I really like Antonio Pierce for this role. If Antonio Pierce does not get a job with a team as their head coach, AP, I think he would be really good for the Giants. One of the smartest players that I've ever covered. I mean, this guy, when he played for the Giants, he was like a coach on the field. The way he was able to diagnose things, adjust, get people lined up. Really, really a smart individual. I would not hate that move if the Giants made that move. Another person to maybe keep an eye on, Chuck Pagano, who was on Harbaugh's staff down in Baltimore. Pagano has a history of being a good defensive-minded coach as well. So maybe he's a guy that they look to bring up as well. Okay, special teams, that's up in the air. You can make an argument, I suppose, albeit a weak argument, I think, for the Giants to keep Michael Gabriel, whose special teams unit in the beginning of last season, they were actually a strength. And then, as players started getting injured and they had to pull guys off of special teams to play them on offense and defense, and the kicking situation spiraled out of control, special teams started to go down the tubes. But Gabriel's not a bad special teams coordinator. Now, do I think he gets retained? I would say probably not. So a guy to watch for special teams is probably going to be Chris Horton, who was the special teams coordinator for Harbaugh down in Baltimore. So that's somebody to keep an eye on. And, there's going to be other candidates, obviously, to keep an eye on as the coaching cycle spins. But these are just some of the names that kind of jump out at you as potential coordinator hires. This is going to be like probably the next important step for the Giants is to get the coordinators right. And, Monken, like I said, looks to be the odds-on favorite for offense. Pierce, I don't know if he's the odds-on favorite, but obviously the Giants did interview him for the head coaching job. And, they did some due diligence on that. So maybe they recommend to Harbaugh, hey, why don't you talk to AP, see if there's a fit there, and like I said, Horton, the familiarity fit aspect of it, that's probably, going to factor into it. Now let's talk assistant coaches here. Now, of the Giants' remaining assistant coaching staff, there are two guys I would probably hope that Harbaugh would keep. One of them, obviously, Carmen Bricillo, the offensive line coach. I think Bricillo stays. I would be very surprised if they go in a different direction. Bricillo has done a wonderful job with the Giants offensive line, and not just, the 5 starters, but you look at the leap that John Michael Schmitz at center took this year. John Michael Schmitz actually played really well, probably the best he's played since he was drafted. You look at the development of Marcus Bowe and how he just stepped in and the game wasn't too big for him. This is a 5th round pick you're talking about. And you go back to Carmen Bricillo and his ways with working with these guys. So I would not be surprised if Carmen Bricillo stays. I don't know if they'll be able to keep James Ferentz, the assistant offensive line coach. I would like to see them do so, but I don't know that they'll keep him. Okay, now, in terms of one other assistant coach from the current Giants staff that I would consider keeping, and this is a guy who doesn't get a lot of flowers and probably should, I would consider keeping running backs coach Liddell Betts. And here's why. The Giants running game finished 5th in the league. All right. That was like the highest placement they've had in years. Now you'll say, okay, well, some of that was because of Jaxson Dart. Okay, granted. But according to Pro Football Focus, every single one of the Giants' 3 main running backs, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Cam Scatterbo before his injury, Devin Singletary, they all had grades of 70 or higher. And I can't remember the last time the Giants had 3 running backs with that high of a grade from Pro Football Focus. These guys were effective on the ground. And, a big amount of credit goes to Liddell Betts, former running back himself, who I think was in his first year this year with the Giants, did a very good job with that group. So really, Brasillo and Betts and Ferenc, those would be the 3 guys I would keep from the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball, I can't see them keeping any of those guys. The defense just underperformed, even with Shane Bowen, being the disaster that he was as the coordinator. Look at how many guys went backwards. They changed over the defensive backs coaches, and that group really, I don't think that group took a step forward. Certainly Deonte Banks didn't take a step forward. The defensive line group was a little bit of a disappointment. So I'm not so sure they keep Andre Patterson moving forward. The linebackers, Charlie Bolin did a great job when he was promoted to defensive coordinator, but I don't think he stays. I think he's probably going to go to another team. Dallas wants him supposedly as a defensive coordinator, so I don't think Charlie Bolin stays. Really, there's nobody else on that side of the ball that you could sit there and you could say, yeah, they got to keep this guy. So I don't expect the Giants to keep a lot of their staff that was previously in place. And that's fine. Change is inevitable. And if it means the Giants are going to be better across the board in all areas, I'm on board with it. I mean, John Harbaugh, as I said, he's built winning programs before. He has an eye for spotting, and hiring good coaching talent. And best of all, the Giants are basically giving him what he needs to build a winning program, which means money is no object. Go out and get the best assistant coaches you possibly can. Now, whether they allow Harbaugh to have, 20 plus members on a coaching staff, I'm sure they will. I'm sure that was discussed. I mean, it's a big staff. I don't know, if you necessarily need all those people, but I could see the argument for it. You break up little segments and you let somebody concentrate on one segment as opposed to having maybe one person concentrate on 5 different things. So I could see the validity in that. So anyway, the coaching staff, that's probably the next big thing the Giants need to resolve now that they have John Harbaugh on board. Now, coming up next, how's this going to work with General Manager Joe Schoen? We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. The seat view feature is a game changer. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. Prices include fees up front, no last-second surprises at checkout, and alerts for teams and matches makes it easy to grab tickets the moment they drop instead of missing out. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. Hey, Giant fans, the NFL playoffs are here and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your Profit Boost pack first thing on game day and see what you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boosts give you more juice on the bet you already like instead of forcing you to bet on something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your Profit Boost pack every NFL playoff game. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. The Giants got their man, John Harbaugh, is finalizing, as of this recording at any rate, he is finalizing a 5-year deal with the New York Giants worth approximately $100 million. So worth it. So exciting. I mean, what a big boost for the Giants organization, and what a huge hire. And for those wondering, John Harbaugh's introductory presser is going to be next week. I think it's going to be early next week. I'm not sure if it's going to be Tuesday or Wednesday. I think Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So it probably will be Tuesday. That would be my guess, but I'll keep you updated on all that, obviously. And of course, I will be there for that presser. I'll have takeaways, all kinds of good stuff. All right. So now that Harbaugh is on his way, what effect does that have on Giants general manager Joe Schoen? The answer is really not that much. Joe Schoen is not being fired, despite what I think a lot of people were hoping for. Joe Schoen, I go back to something I said, I think, on yesterday's show. Joe Schoen began reaching out to Harbaugh to establish a relationship, a getting to know you type of deal, to show him and say, hey, look, I'm not so horrible to work with. I can get along. I can listen. I can collaborate with you. That groundwork, I think, was very instrumental in calming any concerns that Harbaugh might have had. And from what I understand, Joe Schoen, that was a factor coming into this. He needed to be, assured that he would have a say in the roster, as he should. He's a winning head coach, so he should have a say in the roster. But the thing you got to remember with John Harbaugh is he's worked with GMs before, and it's always been a collaborative relationship, and he's had a big voice in, personnel meetings, in draft meetings, all that stuff. He will have that here with the Giants. All right. No question in my mind. He will have that with the Giants. Now, for what it's worth, the Giants have always insisted that their GM and head coach work hand in hand. So by that, I mean, Joe Schoen likes a player and John Harbaugh likes a different player. The two of them have a discussion. They decide what is the best course of action for the team. And it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. It becomes an organizational decision. That's how it's going to work moving forward. All right. There have been instances in which Joe Schoen wanted a player and Brian Daboll wanted a different player, and Brian Daboll, his opinion, won out. That is expected to continue. The reason why, the Giants are keeping Joe Schoen, amongst others, he's going to handle the business aspect of it. There's going to be salary cap management, the contracts, all that stuff. You don't want to overload John Harbaugh. So for those of you who are like, oh, just let John Harbaugh be the GM and head coach, no, that would have been way too much. Again, you look at how John Harbaugh structures his staff and how he had over 20 staff members in Baltimore, and each one had a specific role they were responsible for. That allowed them to, focus on one area that was deemed important and then bring it all together under the head coaching umbrella. And that's how it's going to work with regards to personnel. Joe Schoen, Brandon Brown, Chris Rossetti, Tim McDonald, they're all going to continue doing what they've been doing. which is vetting personnel, coming up with recommendations. John Harbaugh goes to them and says, hey, I need a cornerback too that can do X, Y, and Z. Well, that staff is now going to go back and they're going to do their homework and they're going to present John Harbaugh and say, here's a list of guys that can do what you want at cornerback. Harbaugh then goes to Joe Schoen and says, okay, I've reviewed the list. I think we should go from here. If Joe Schoen says, okay, well, I think we should go here, the two of them have a discussion, they reach a consensus, boom, it's done. That's how it's going to work. That's how it should work. So Joe Schoen, not a problem here with John Harbaugh. He was just not going to be, the deal breaker, which I think some people at the beginning of this process thought might be the case. So overall, brighter days look to be on the horizon for the Giants organization. Just, a huge, huge hire. The Giants needed this. And, not just that, but from a fan perspective, a lot of fans at the end of last year, clean house, they didn't want to show up. They sold their tickets. I mean, I sat at MetLife Stadium. The stands were empty. I would often tell Ed Valentine, who sits next to me in the press box, I say, gee, you think they could fit all the fans that are in the stadium down in the lower bowl? And Ed would be like, yeah, probably with some leftover seats to boot, to go with it. I don't think that's going to be the case come next year with opening day. I expect MetLife Stadium to be rocking. Hopefully the Giants, come out. I mean, I'm curious to see what personnel decisions they make. It's going to be a fun offseason, Giant fans, and I can't wait to bring it all to you here on the Locked On Giants podcast. All right, Giant fans, before we say goodbye, I want to thank you, as always, for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. It is appreciated. And don't forget, check out our Everydayer Club. Our Everydayer Club, all access. You get so many exclusive benefits, including a one-on-one texting opportunity with me. You get a invitation to our lunch hour video calls where you can just come and ask whatever questions you want. A 15% discount to the Locked On merch store, an exclusive newsletter, and so much more. So do check it out. You can go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer, where you can find the Locked On Giants podcast and click on that to go right to our landing page. Or you can go to lockedonnygiants.supercast.com to sign up directly. We have 2 levels of membership, the Everydayer basic membership and the all access. Do check out the all access though. It's really the best benefit for you. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for me. I will see you next week here with all new episodes on the Locked On Giants podcast. Have a great weekend.